All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to what is going to be the last Visug session in 2020. So I think it's time that we leave this year behind, and so we want to do that also with one last session. And today we have from the Netherlands joining us Eldert Grootenboer, who is going to be talking about API management, something that I also am very interested in. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So the session is going to take about an hour or so. And of course, we'd like to make it as interactive as possible. So please post your questions in the Q&A. And so we'll follow up with these questions probably after the session, but maybe Eldert will also pick a session during the, pick a question during the session. So if you have anything else, please let us know in the chat. So I'll be here on mute, so you can always let us know if something isn't working fine for you as well. So with that, I'd like to give the floor to Eldert. Eldert, take it away and good luck.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me today. So I'm going to talk about the lessons learned from API management trenches, or basically what I learned from different customers by implementing API management in different scenarios, and what I ran into, the tooling I use, things like that. So first of all, I'm Eldert Grootenboer, living in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. So I work at a company called Motion 10. So we focus on basically everything Microsoft. And we are based here in the Rotterdam, the building over here. And we are based here on the 42nd floor. So actually the top floor. I haven't been there in a while though, so I'm missing the views we normally get from there. So hopefully we can actually go back to the office at some point again. Like I said, Motion 10 focuses on everything Microsoft. So myself, I'm a cloud solution architect, mostly focused on apps and infrastructure, Power Platform, and data analytics. I'm also an Azure API, so I love working with the community. So I do a lot of these talks, I write books, I write blog posts. Basically anything I can do with the community, I like to do. And finally, you can always contact me on Twitter. So if you have any questions or any remarks, just let me know. I will always answer there. So like I said, today we're going to talk about Azure API Management. And what I will be doing is taking you to a use case from one of our clients called De Goudse. De Goudse is an insurance company in the Netherlands, a smaller insurance company. And they do a lot of things with cloud, with Azure, but also still have a lot of like on-premise stuff, like they have the AS400s. So they have a quite diverse landscape. But we have been there working with them on their API management issues for, I think, about challenges, I should say. Their API management challenges for about 4 years now. So basically, I came in there when they were starting, okay, we want to do something with APIs. And I've been helping them throughout the years to basically help them develop their whole API management and integration platform. So when we came in at Goudse, they basically said, okay, so let's just talk what we have. First of all, we have our service and data. So our service that we want to expose to the outside world, our databases, our management systems. There's a lot of different things that we want to start exposing to the outside world, to our partners, to clients. So basically everyone that wants to connect to this. And so the people who want to connect to this, or the applications that want to connect to these, are these connected experiences. And these connected experiences can basically be anything. It could be a website, it could be an API, it could be a device. So they have quite a few different types of different connected experiences that they want to expose. And so of course they want to do this through an API-centric architecture. So they are going to expose their service and their data to those connected experiences using APIs. And so I've been working with them to help them solve their API strategy challenges, to help them to make sure that what they're exposing is exposed in a secure way, under governance and things like that. So this is where API management comes in. So API management basically has 3 different pillars. We have our API publishers. So this is the Goudse in this case. These are the people that are creating those service and data and want to connect them to those APIs. We have the app developers, the people that create those connected experiences and want to consume those APIs. And then API management itself will be here in the middle over these APIs. And basically it will have a front end, so where the connected experience is connecting, and it will have back end, which will be connecting to those service and data. And API management will be in between, acting as a proxy. That's the first part, that abstraction. API management is in between of here, acting as a proxy, basically taking away all of the backend from the front end. So those connected experiences don't know what they're talking to in the backend. They don't know if this is a service on Azure, if this is a SOAP service somewhere on premises, if this is something hosted at a different provider, or if this might be just like an AS400 that's being serviced. They don't know about this, and they shouldn't know about this. So for the Gouders, it was really important that those connect experience did not need to know about their backend. Whether this is a C# application, a PHP application, a Java application, with all their different intricacies, they should not care about this. They should just have one entry point, and in that entry point, they go to those APIs and connect from there, and then they are completely abstracted away from what's happening in the backend. Second, it needs to be secure and protected. The Gouders is an insurance company, which means they have a lot of sensitive data that they need to make sure that is exposed to a secure and protected way. API management helps here as well. So API management allows us to set up security on our front end. So basically over here on those connect experiences, and say to those connect experiences, for example, I want you to authenticate using OAuth, or I want you to connect using certificates or basic authentication. So I can have one single type of authentication on my front end. I can do this per partner. I could do this for all my APIs. I can one single or multiple different types of experience on the front end for authentication, and have different authentication on the back end actually. And this was very important for the Gouders because they come from a legacy landscape. So they have a lot of legacy applications. And those applications were built when security was not the most important thing yet, because everything was hidden behind the firewall and behind the VNet and completely shut away from the internet. Now we're going to expose it through the internet. So now all of a sudden it's much more important that there's security actually there. So some of the services in the backend might have no authentication or maybe only basic authentication. By placing API management in between there, we can actually say we are going to protect those services with a decent authentication, like OAuth, without having to change those backend services. Because a lot of those services just are running, we cannot really touch them anymore. It's legacy, it's not something we want to touch. By placing API management in between, we can actually still expose them to the internet in a secure way. They want to manage the lifecycle. As you can imagine, there are new services coming in, old services are going out. So they need a way to make sure that new services can keep on coming in, but still have the same experience for those consumers where they just know, okay, this is where my services are, and they don't care if I'm going to change my ERP, for example, to a different system. They should not care about that. They just should get a new endpoint. So that's what API management helps as well. You can actually have the definition of revisions and versions, where revisions are about non-breaking changes. So I can just create a new revision of an API. I can start implementing the API without anyone knowing about this API. Just me as the publisher just knows about, okay, there's a new API, I need to do this new URL. I start working with this, I make sure my definitions are okay. And this might be something like I'm introducing a new field that's optional, something like that. No, nothing breaks. And at some point, you can just say, okay, now make this new revision, make it a current revision. At that point, anyone that's hitting my endpoint will just be automatically routed to this new version or to this new revision and be handling on that. So for our app developers, they don't need to change anything unless they want to take into account these new capabilities that we have added. Versions are for breaking changes, and versions actually run side by side. Of course, in the backend, I also have to make sure that things are running side by side. But in this case, my connect experience will connect to my endpoint, for example, on /v1. And then there can be a new endpoint /v2 that's being routed to a different backend endpoint. So when I do this, I can actually say it's running side by side. So I can make sure that people are starting to use my new API. They are starting to actually shift over. So I should see the usage of my old API go down, usage of my new API go up. And then at some point I can say, okay, everyone is over. I'm now going to switch off this v1 endpoint. I'm going to throw out the backend service, and then it's done. And finally, monitor and measuring, because I want to know what's happening in my environment. So I need to make sure I actually monitor my environment. I measure what's coming through. API management helps here as well. You get a lot of out-of-the-box dashboards where you can actually see who's calling me, from where, on which APIs, at which time. So I actually have quite a nice overview of what's happening in my environment, all just from API management. Now, on the other hand, we have the app developers. Like I said, app developers are the people that actually are creating those connected experiences. And so they want to know which APIs are actually available to me. Like as an app developer, I want to know, okay, I'm going to consume your APIs, but which APIs do you have available and which operations are on there? And all of this I would like to know like dynamically. When something changes, I should know that something has changed for me. So API management does this to the developer portal. And developer portal actually allows you to go to a portal and immediately see for you which APIs are available to you as a person. I can then request access to those APIs, so I can ask for a subscription key, and this subscription key can either be assigned automatically, or I might have an approval step in there where an API publisher actually has to approve this subscription key. They can then actually start trying this out, so in the same developer portal, they can have a try it out button, and this try it out button will take them to an environment where we have prepared some requests for them as API publishers, so they can actually send in these requests. And this request might actually be going to a backend. Now, of course, don't do this on your production environment. We normally do this on pre-production, but you can actually hook it up to your actual systems. So they can actually already test out with different requests and get different responses back to know if this actually is what they want to do. And finally, once they said, okay, this is what we need, then they can get started. So the same developer portal, once again, it allows you to get access to code samples. It gives you links to the SDKs and allows you to very easily get started with your whole implementation as an app developer consuming these APIs. So in short, the three pillars are the publish pillar in the Azure portal, where our API publishers will create those APIs, will set up the authentication, will set up lifecycle management, create monitoring and logging, and all of this they do through this Azure portal, just as any Azure service. Then we have the gateway in the middle, and this is this proxy, so which disconnects my front end from my back end, where I implement those policies, and those policies we'll come back to later, but those policies about authentication, throttling, things like that. And finally, we have the developer portal, which is where our app developers go to actually see what's available to them, get access, and start trying it out, and finally actually start working with those APIs. So once we talked about this with the Goudse, they said, okay, so this is what we need. We are going for this API-centric architecture. API management should be part of this. And then comes the question, okay, what about instances? So how are we going to set up things like DTAP? How are we actually going to decide on the tiers? And so for API management, you pay basically per hour or per minute, but normally you'll just leave this running for all the time, except on one tier, which is relatively new. I think it's when GA at Ignite. And so these days you actually have a consumption tier as well. So you can actually do serverless with API management these days. That's the first area I want to talk about, is this consumption tier. The consumption tier actually allows you to do most of the things that you can do with other API management tiers. There's not everything in there. There's a few things that you cannot do. And those are mostly around shared things like setting up your certificates and things like that. But most of this just works, and you pay per use. So you pay per call. It's quite cheap if you look at numbers, like you get first million calls or something like that free, and after that it's like a few euros per million requests or something like that. So if you are a smaller company, or if you have more like intermittent loads, this might be a very nice thing. So that's the one consumption tier. Then we have the other tiers, which are the basic tier, the standard tier, and the premium tier, and the developer tier. So the basic tier, as the name says, gives you all the basic things that you need from API management. Then you have the standard tier, and this has everything that the basic tier has, plus Active Directory integration for your developer portal. So if you have a lot of internal developers, or you have a lot of partners in your Active Directory, you can actually use the Active Directory as your authentication method for the portal, for the developer portal. So they actually don't need a separate account, but can just use their own account. Then we have the premium tier, and once again, as the name suggests, this is where everything nice is. So in the premium tier, you get things like the VNet integration, you get load balancing, geo load balancing, all those nice things. You get the self-hosted gateway. So all those extra things that you would need in an enterprise scenario, those are in the premium tier. So with the Goudse, basically we decided to go with premium tier because they needed VNet integration. Now, VNet integration for now is just in the premium tier. So if you want that, you are in this premium tier. Now, of course, this does help. You have to look at pricing as well. Like I said, consumption tier you pay per call. And then I think like the standard tier is, or the basic tier is like 120 euros. Standard tier is about 600 euros. And premium tier is something like 1200 euros. And developer tier is like 40 euros per month. So depending on your needs on which requirements you have around the options, how much money you want to spend, you'll go to either one of these tiers. And so for the house, this meant, okay, we want VNet integration because we still have a lot of service in our VNet that we want to expose to API management. So they decide on the premium tier here. So that's the first thing you have to think about. The next thing we have to think about is settings and secrets. So with the house, we said, okay, so we are going to implement our APIs. And of course, you always have some settings that you want to reuse over different APIs. This might be something like a password. This might be something like a connection string. This might be something just like a general setting of about how long do you want to keep your logging data. There's different settings that you will want to set. And so for settings, API management has a concept of named values. These are key value pairs where you just assign a key, for example, logging timeout, and then you have a value of, for example, 7 for 7 days or something like that, depending on your API, what you need. Then you can use these settings in your policies later on, which we will talk about more later, but you can just reference these named values in your policies. Second thing I have to think about is secrets, because named values are nice, but it's not meant for secrets, or at least it wasn't. So named value pairs, what you can get is you get a key value pair. You could actually mark it as secrets, but anyone that had access to this could actually just say, I want to show the value for this. Not great is this if this is your HR system or your financial system, where your developers probably should not have access to, except to create those APIs. Now, what we did previously was actually implement a policy that would call out the key vault. But since yesterday, we actually have a new key named value type, where you can actually reference the key vault from our named value. So I'll show you this in just a second. And finally here, access management. So the Goudse wants to bring in their own developers, external developers. So they really have to think about, okay, how do we give access to the right APIs, to the right people? So let's have a quick demo on this. So we'll go and do a few things over here. So first of all, we are going to look at that access management. And access management, like I said, you can use your Active Directory for this, or you could do it from within API management itself. If I do it in API management itself, I have my users over here. I can just create a new user. I'm not going to type this in. I think everyone trusts that I can type. But what you would do is to provide these fields over here, set a password, and then add this user. So I already did this with Jane Doe. And as you will see, Jane Doe is over here. It has their Outlook.com. Like I said, we are using API Management itself, so not Active Directory in this case. And what you will see here is that Jane Doe is part of a couple of groups. That's the next part we will look at, groups. So groups, much like an Active Directory group, a group is a way to bring together a group of people. We normally do this with the Goudse around partners. So for example, the Goudse might have partner Contoso, partner Fabricam, things like that. And those partners will have their developers in their own groups. So when we no longer work with one of these partners, we can just throw away that group and all their access will be retrieved. So once again, you can just create your own groups. You will get a couple out-of-the-box groups, like the administrators, developers, and guests are out-of-the-box groups. But you can also create your own groups, which I did in this case with Fabricam. So Jane Doe is part of this Fabricam group, so you can just add the members over here. And then we can do the next part. So Jane Doe is now part of the Fabricam group. So what we are going to look at now is products. So I go over here to products. And products are a way to group your APIs and give access or set policies for specific groups. So in this case, I have this Fabricam product over here. And what I did on this Fabricam product is I said I want to create or add an API on this. So I can now select which APIs are part of this product. Let's say I'm going for the Echo API. I can then say, okay, now everyone that has been added to the Fabricam product can access my Echo API. Now, of course, I also need to make sure that there is actually people in here. So what I also do is add a product to this, add a group to this product. In this case, I added the Fabricam group to my Fabricam product. So now everyone in my Fabricam group, which in this case is Jane Doe, has now access to the Echo API through this product. And this way I can have different APIs exposed to different partners. So some partners might need to have like my APIs for my HR systems or my financial systems. Others might need my order systems. Others might need my inventory systems. So depending on the product, I can now assign certain access. I can also set policies on this. So policies are a way to basically enhance your APIs, which we'll talk about more in a bit. But as you can see, I can actually set a policy on top of a product. And we'll see more about this in a few minutes. So that is about user management. Now, like I said, we can also see our named values. So if I go over here to my named values, I can actually see that I have some different named values over here. And as you can see, I have these secrets over here. But like I said, anyone that has access to this could just say, okay, show me the value. And they could then still grab this value over here and still connect to my system, which I didn't want. Now, so what we can do since yesterday, we actually have this new one over here. So I can now add a new secret. And over here on my type, I can say this is a key vault secret. If I do plain, it will just be plain text. Secret is the one that you just saw where it will hide it out initially in the portal, but you can still show it. Key vault actually just stores it in key vault and adds a reference. So I did this for my secure secret. As you can see here, I just my secret over here. So I'm just referencing this other secret over here. I can just, I use the system assigned identity for this. So I actually use managed identity to connect from my API management to my key vault. So I actually, of course, need to make sure that on my key vault, I have added the access to this. If you go over here to my key vault over here, there we go. Here in my key vault, I now have this secret, my user password that we just saw. And now here, I actually have my actual value. So now someone with access to API management cannot see this. Only people with actually access to my key vault can see this password now. So one more thing I want to show you is, like I said, I'm now running, of course, in developer tier. So because this is a development environment for me, so I won't, but I can actually quite easily change this as well. Let's see over here. Pricing tier, that's the one I want to show you. So I can actually say, okay, I want to just scale this up now. You cannot scale back to consumption plan. So if you are consumption, you cannot scale to a dedicated SKU or the other way around. But other than that, you can actually just upgrade or downgrade quite easily by selecting a new tier. So that's something that you can keep in mind if you're started, for example, on the basic tier, but you now need that Active Directory integration or you need VNet integration, you can actually scale up quite easily. So don't overprice yourself from the start, but actually just scale up as you need to different tiers. Okay, so next up we have our, there we go, hybrid scenarios. So like I said, the cloud actually has quite a bit of hybrid scenarios still going on. They still have a lot of on-premises things. Some things will never go to the cloud, like the AS400 will always be on-prem for them. So they will stay in this hybrid scenario. Now, API Management has a couple of different options when you do want to do hybrids. And the first one I already told you about, they are using VNet integration. So what they did is just place API Management inside their VNet, place the application gateway in front of that, and from the application gateway, they go into their VNet, and then that's where the API Management lives and actually integrates with all those different systems. There are a couple of options as well. Like I said, VNet integration is part of the premium tier. Many of our clients don't want to have this VNet integration just to call out to one or two different services on premise. So what they do is actually just do IP whitelisting. So IP whitelisting you can do on any dedicated SKU. So except consumption plan, you always have a static IP. And of course, when you have static IP, you can just whitelist your static IP on your on-premise firewall and just add the access from your API management to those on-premise systems. So that's something that we see quite a lot. Another option is the self-host gateway. And the self-host gateway actually allows you to run API management within your own environment. So whether this is in your own data center, another cloud, wherever you want, you can just host your own API management instance. So we use this quite a bit, not at house, but at another client, where they actually have quite a big on-premise landscape, and they don't want the data to go out to the internet to just come back in again. So they actually have one of these self-hosted gateways on premises. And so any service that wants to connect to another service on premises just connects to the on-premise self-hosted gateway of API management, and that way never goes out to the internet. So that's a perfect opportunity if you need like this disconnected state, because you can actually run this disconnected, or you want to have like low latency, or if you just want to have API management as close to your APIs as possible. So that's where the self-hosted gateway comes in. It runs on the containers. So wherever you can run containers, you can run this, which is basically anywhere then. And they are also working on having, at the moment it's just like self-managed, but they are working on integrating this with Azure Arc as well. So also expect to see more about that, where you can actually quite nicely manage all the different gateways. Next up is Developer Portal. We already talked about this a bit, and Developer Portal is basically where our consumers will go to create their APIs. Now, if you know about the Swagger editor, which you can get with basically anything that you do with Swagger these days, you get this nice overview. It looks a little bit like this, but it's on steroids. So this is Developer Portal that you can just get out of the box. It will look like this. And as you can see, you can now go to your APIs, to your products. You can log in to see your own available APIs. You can sign up for APIs. But this is actually in the publisher mode, what you see here. So you see this bar over here. And this actually allows you to customize your own developer experience quite easily. So what you actually can do is you can click here on those tags where you can just type new tags. You can bring in new boxes, stuff like that. And when you click on one of these, you can actually go to an environment that looks a bit like this. So as you can see, here you can just say, okay, I want to have some different fonts. I want to have different colors. And when I saw this first time on stage, some of Microsoft was like, okay, yeah, so we can just go within 5 minutes, you can go to this. Now, I'm not a front-end person, so I was like, okay, so if I would have need to do this, I would probably be spending 3 weeks on this and still have nothing. So I started trying this out myself. And actually, it is quite easy. Like, it took me about 10 minutes to make something like this. I'm not going to say this is perfectly aesthetic or anything like that. Like I said, I'm still a backend developer. I don't know about color settings and stuff like that. But just being able to just quickly say, okay, our Motion 10 colors, our Motion 10 logo, our backgrounds, just in like 10 minutes to have this completely set up, that was quite nice to me. And so actually it just looks like I said, from this to this is about 10 minutes for me. And just very easy. So if you just go back over to the portal. So we go over here to my public developer portal. Let's just open this. As you can see, I'm now in this designer experience. I can now, as you can see, I can just now say, okay, I want to add maybe some testimonials in here. Or I want to add a map in here. You can do whatever you want. You can just place all these different blocks here. I can make new layouts. I can do all these kind of things where I can just say, okay, what do you want here? I can, of course, also remove these things. Like I can say, I don't want this one. I maybe want to edit the text on this one. So as you can see, it's quite easy to just completely make this to your own liking. Also, I can now go over here. I can say, okay, I want some different colors maybe. So let's say I want to have this, let's say, primary color over here. Let's make this into a different color. Here we go. I can then, let's see, I'll just go back. Oh, yeah, so as you can see, I can just easily, I just have to go back over here to, how did I get back? Sorry about that, I forgot how to actually, I should be able to just, there it is. It was control click. So as you can see, it now has changed my primary color to red. There's colors over here that have been changed. So it just is very easy to adjust it to your own needs. So if you have been working with API management longer, then you probably know the old developer portal, which was always a nightmare to customize. Now with this new developer portal, or new, it has been around for about a year or so now, but with this developer portal, it's really easy to create your own look and feel. and just have something whenever one of those developers comes to your portal, they immediately know, yes, this is Motion 10. So just very easy for them to recognize and start working with this. So next I want to talk about policies. I already mentioned them a couple of times, so we're now going to go into them. But before I go into policies, I first want to introduce the AZT. The AZT is a container terminal here in Rotterdam, one of the largest container terminals worldwide. And so the AZT was actually quite interesting because they were a client of Motion 10 at some point. And when I heard they were coming to us, I was like, I want to work with them. So this has been a few years ago, and when they came in, they were like, okay, so we wanted to start working with you guys because you have an API. And this API is basically saying, okay, where is your container? So you get container details, like you provide your container number. And then you know, okay, where's this container? Is it already in the harbor? Is it still out on sea? Is it being shipped? Is it being unloaded? Or is it ready for me to pick up? And why this is interesting for me is because I actually worked on this ship before. So before I was in IT, I was actually working as deckhand on this ship. And so what this ship does, as you can see, it's a container ship, and we went from Rotterdam to Basel in Switzerland. And the AZT was one of the big container terminals where we would pick up a lot of these containers. So I actually knew the AZT from a perspective of as a deckhand, like working with these containers on the ship. I drove around on the AZT terminal. Actually, that terminal is quite nice. They already had like self-driving container pickups driving around already like 10, 15, 20 years ago, completely autonomous, everything like that. So it's a really cool place, and they have just always been very innovative. But so for me, as like knowing the AZT from that perspective, it was quite interesting to see how I could help them now from their IT perspective. So that's why I wanted to work with this client. And so when I started working with them, they were saying, okay, so we have this API for getting your container status. But what we run into is like someone created this at some point, like just a nice to have. And as these things go, like we started to provide them to our clients, and it now has become so massive. Like we have complete companies that are just checking this all the time. We have software suppliers that actually have built this into their own products. And we have always been just exposing this as a free service, but it's just getting too expensive. There's too many calls coming in. We have to keep adding hardware because it's just not okay to do this on the current hardware. So we want to actually see how we can make some money out of this and actually bring down those calls, or at least cover our expenses on this. And this is where policies come in. So policies in API management allow you to add capabilities and restrictions onto your APIs. You can do this without actually touching your backend. And so what this allows you to do for the AZT, for example, is say, let's add some restrictions on this. So we are going to introduce products. So like I said, on products, you can introduce policies per product. And we are going to introduce 3 products: bronze, silver, and gold. So the bronze product, we are going to set some policies on that. So the first policy we are going to set is to say, I'm going to no longer allow you to call us more than 10 times per minute. So this is still fine if you're just like a small supplier, like you're a truck driver, you have an app on your phone, you just want to check your own container, that's fine. However, if you are a big company that is doing thousands of containers per hour, providing those, then you cannot do this anymore. So then we have the silver and the gold products. And so I don't know quite exactly the numbers anymore. I think like silver was 1,000 calls per minute and gold was unlimited. But basically what he said, okay, if you want to do more calls, you just have to pay us for this. So the unlimited was for those software companies that were actually pushing this into their own products. Then the silver was for the bigger companies, and the bronze one, the free one, was still for the small companies. But now, because they actually could say this, they could actually start, okay, if you want to use more calls, then you start paying us and you get this other tier. We also introduced caching. Once again, also for 3 different tiers. But caching is also something that you can just create with API management out of the box. It's 2 lines of code. It's very easy to add. And what you actually do is say is, okay, for my bronze tier, I think we had like 10 minutes caching, silver 1 minute caching, and gold like minimal caching, like I think 5 seconds or something like that, just to make sure we didn't overwhelm the backend with too many calls. Now, Because this is just policies that you can very easily set up, it was very easy for them to do this without touching the backend once again, because like I said, this is something that has been built at some point. The person that built it is no longer there. It will take a lot of time to actually start reverse engineering this. How was this built? With API management, we don't have to do this. We just set up API management, we configure those policies, and it works. Another thing was, this was a SOAP backend. So they who said, well, that's fine and dandy, but we want to become more modern, so we want to start exploring this over REST. So API management also has a nice capability here. Because with API management, you can actually just say, I have this SOAP backend, I'm loading in the WSDL, and API management creates a REST frontend out of this. So without touching the backend, once again, you can just create a nice REST frontend on your SOAP backend. API management takes care of the whole mapping of the data, make sure that all the operations are being mapped correctly. And that was also something that was very nice for them, because once again, with just minimal effort, they can now publish a modern API. So another thing you can do with API management is chaining those policies. So you can actually say that the output of one policy is the input for the next policy. So you can set variables, for example. And I just mentioned you, like previously, before yesterday, what we will do when we would need to have a secret is actually call out to API to key vault. So that you would do, like you would call out to the key vault from one policy, get the result back as a variable, and then use that variable in your next operation to actually do your authentication, for example. So you can chain those policies together. And what's also quite nice, you actually have an error handling policy that you can use as well. So you can check for certain status codes, or you can just say whenever something goes wrong, please execute this. And this is awesome if you want to, for example, remove stack traces. And this application was one of those applications that would just give back a stack trace when something went wrong. So if you provided, for example, a non-existing container ID, it would just give you a complete stack trace of what's going on. That's not something we want to do, because this gives quite a bit of information to attackers. So with API management, actually what we did is say, whenever you have a status code above 400, we are just going to strip out all the stack trace, and we are just going to implement a nice error message, depending on the status code, depending on the message that's coming back. You would actually get a nice response message saying like, you were provided invalid container ID, or something like that. So this actually allows you to have that nice chaining and error handling in there as well. And finally, you can do this on different scopes. So those policies you can set on 4 different scopes. The first scope is the instance. And so this is your whole API management instance. So everything that's in your API management will get this. And we normally use this for setting up logging, for example. So I have logging for all the different APIs configured in one place. And then you can, for example, log it to Event Hubs, where we can build nice reports with Power BI. So that's one of the scopes. The next scope is the products. So I already mentioned this, where you can have different products. And for example, have a bronze, silver, gold product. Or have something like a Fabricam product and Contoso product, where you can say, for example, on my bronze product, I can only do 10 calls per minute. On my silver product, I can do 1,000 calls per minute. Or Contoso wants to authenticate with certificates, and Fabricam wants to connect using OAuth, for example. So that way you can have the different products with those different policies. The next scope would be your API, so your API itself. And here you would probably set something up like authentication or things like that. So with your whole API saying, for example, this is my HR API, I always need to use OAuth on this. So that would be where you would configure that. And then finally is your operations. And so your operations are really like your post, your get, or something like that, where you might say, I want to implement caching, for example, on all my get operations. So I can just implement this on my get operation. I can just implement this policy. And then for that one operation, it would actually start caching those responses. So what does a policy look like? A policy is a combination of XML for out-of-the-box policies and C# for custom policies. And so out-of-the-box policies, there's about 15, or now more like 30-ish, 40-ish out-of-the-box policies. I'm not going to name them all. You can look them up on docs.microsoft.com, where there's a complete list. But it's things like throttling, like caching, like rate limiting, all those kind of different things. But if you need to do something that's not out of the box, you can actually create your own custom policy. And so, for example, we did this to strip out those stack traces by doing like a check on the node that's coming in, checking, actually not for the stack traces, we did this for another thing. So what we did do is filter out sensitive data. So there is some sensitive data and some nodes that we want to filter out at this company. So what we did is actually get back the response and then just do a JObject query. So make a JObject out of this in C# code, and then just remove the nodes that we want to filter out, and then just return the result without those nodes. So this is about 5 lines of code in C#, and then you can just use this in your policy. Now, do know that custom policies are, you can do some things with .NET, but it's not like you can build a full API in this or something like that. It's restricted to mostly JObject and string methods that you can use. And so you cannot really change the context, but you can update like your message itself, like can update the body and stuff like that. So this is when you need that bit more flexibility when you cannot reach this with out-of-the-box policies. So now we have created our APIs, we have set up our policies. Next up is actually deploying this, making sure this is actually deployed to our environment. So your environment might look something like this. There might be more stages in between, but the principle will be the same. Like you have something that's running in production and something that's running in non-production. And then our API publishers, those are the people that are actually in control of our production. And our API developers, our internal API developers, are in control of our development environment, where they are creating new services and things like that. So our API publishers, what they will do is create a set of templates, so ARM templates. So everything with API management can actually be configured and deployed through ARM. And so what we do is create some different templates. So you have your service template, which is basically your instance, which the instance itself. They have API templates, so your APIs, your operations, maybe your products, things like that. They have some shared templates, for example, for your logging or things like that. And then you have a master template, so that you can either do one template to deploy one template deployment at once, or just orchestrate all of those different templates if you, for example, want to set up a new environment. Now, when the API developers are creating a new API or are updating an API, what they will do is just fork this repository. So they have now their own developer repository with all these templates. And then they use these templates to deploy this either manually or most often as part of their CI/CD pipelines. So in this case, they will probably use the master template, deploy that entire instance with all the APIs, and then start making their changes, creating new operations, creating new APIs, whatever they want to do. And then at some point they will say, okay, I'm either going to update my API management directly. So when they have built new API, they're going to load into API management, configure it there. And then they can extract it using the extraction tool. There's a link for this in just a second. But the extraction tool basically allows you to say, here's my API management, and I want you to extract this API or my complete API management instance. But you can just basically say, okay, here's my instance, and please extract this for me. That's one option. The other option they have is they say, okay, I'm going to build my API, and actually going just to create an open API definition out of this. And if they have the open API definition, they can use another tool called the creator. And this will generate those templates from the API definition. So depending on how your API developers want to do this, either configure it in the portal or just make that API definition, they have two options to create those ARM templates. Now, once they are done, they will just have all these new ARM templates in this repository. They will then just create a pull request. There will be some validations, like mostly it will be automatic validations. Maybe those API publisher will do some checks as well. And at some point, it will be merged into my repository, my publisher repository, and be deployed to my production environment. So this entire process, including the tools I just said, are actually available on aka.ms/API-DevOps. So if you want to read this back once again, Microsoft has actually created a whole guidance on this, on what I just told you, how you should set this up. So the final part I want to talk about is tooling. And tooling is very important with API management because API management can be quite large. So you need good tools to actually work with this. And I love Visual Studio Code for working with anything Azure, but especially API management. Because first of all, I can just very easily explore my resources. I can get a whole list of all the different resources I have within all my different instances over my different subscriptions. So I don't, when I have to go to API management, I don't have to start up the portal, go to my subscription. Then if I need another API management in different subscription, open up a new portal, or go to all these different portals and all the different blades. Now I can actually just do this from Visual Studio Code over all my different API management instances. I can also edit my policies. So I have IntelliSense in there, I have syntax highlighting, and I can just edit my policy right from Visual Studio Code and upload it directly. And after that, generate the ARM template out of that. I can test it from my Visual Studio Code as well. Like I can create a test call, and then I can actually just call this out directly to my API management and start looking into debugging and stuff like that. And of course, this is all DevOps integrated, so I can actually create my ARM templates, push them into my repository, and then push this out to my code. So let's have a look over here. So here I'm in Visual Studio Code. And what I want to show you here is, let me just close this one. If I go over to this blade over here, my Azure blade, as you can see, there's a lot of different services that have these extensions. So it's just an extension you install in Visual Studio Code. So API Management has one, but also Logic has functions, integration accounts. Like there's a lot of different different services that have this. And what you see here, I have all my different subscriptions. In my subscription, I have my different API Management instances. And if I take this API Management instance over here, let me just make sure I have the correct one. There we go. So if I have this over here, I can now just start looking, okay, which APIs do I have? I can then actually start looking at those APIs. Let me just bring this down over here. So I can actually update this as well. So I could now update my APIs. I could say I want a different display name. I can now just say save this. Come on, down. So it's not updating this. It's actually updating this in my live API management instance. And as you can see, it now has been uploaded, and it now my display name has been changed. I can now look into this Echo API. I can look into operations. I see all different operations here. I can check my policy. So I can actually just say, okay, for this Echo API, I might want to say, okay, I want some throttling on this. Actually, rate limiting, that's the one I'm looking for. So I can now say, okay, on this API, I want to do rate limiting. So as you can see, it has IntelliSense. I can now say, okay, please do this for me. I can then say, okay, I want to make this to 10 calls in 60 seconds. I might say only for specific APIs, but I'm just going to say for everything. I'd save it again, it's now updating, and once again, my policies are now uploaded to the cloud directly, and I can now immediately start testing this out. And for testing it out, it's also quite easy. So let's say I want to test this, this post request. So I can now say, I can right click on this, and I can now say test this operation. So I now say test. I will actually need to provide a subscription key over here. So let me just grab a subscription key. And once again, I don't have to leave my Visual Code. I can just say copy my subscription key. I can then say, okay, this is my subscription key. And this is actually using the REST client extension for this. So what you see here is the REST client extension, which actually allows me to just have like this post API management endpoint. I have my content type over here, my headers, and my body. I can now just say send request. And this will now call out to my API management and actually do that post request over here. And what this specific API does is actually transform my JSON to XML. So I can look over at this policy where we should actually, let me just do it like this, so we can actually read it. So as you can see, this policy over here for this post operation just says, okay, JSON to XML. So this will just take my request and transform it to XML and give that back. Now I can also actually start debugging my different policies. So if I go over to this, let's do this get over here. I can do over here, I can say start policy debugging. So this will actually start up like, as you can see, it starts this up. I can now say, okay, send this request. What it will now do, it will hit all the different endpoints that have policy sets, or the different parts where all policies are set. Because like I said, you have different scopes. So this is a policy that has been set on my API. So this is the policy that's been set on all my API. As you can see, there's the rate limit that I just added, and I can now step through this. So I can now say, okay, step through this. I then come in another policy section, and this is the policy section of my operation. So apparently on this operation, I have a cache lookup. I can now just start stepping into this as well. What I can also do is, let me see over, where is it? Over here. I can also say, I want to see what's actually in my watch list. I can actually look at different variables. But I can also say, I want to actually go into my request context. So because I get in a request, and this is something that's quite handy if you are running into issues like, why is my policy not working correctly? Or what do I actually need to get out of this? I can now just start looking into this. Like, I want to know what's in my request. So I can see, okay, so there was a request URL, it was in the get method. I can see the parameters that were matched, like all these kind of things. I can just step through this, and I can just see what's actually going on in my API. So I can look in the operation, I can look in the API itself. I can get all this information that's just happening with API management. And this makes it much easier to actually figure out what's going wrong if something does not work with my API. So I just keep stepping through, like, okay, I'm now going to forward the request. At some point, I'm going to get my response back. I'm going to cache this. And then it's done. So that's very easy to just say, okay, I want to actually debug my policy and just know what's going on in here. So that's Visug code. I want to show you one more thing. And for that thing, I actually had to go over here to my API management instance, because that's how my whole monitoring and logging. So if I go over here to my, let's see, analytics over here. If I go over to my analytics, I can actually see who's calling me from where and things like that. So if I go over to geography, I can actually, so for some reason it takes a few minutes for my request actually to come in. So that's why I don't see them yet. But I could actually see, okay, where I'm being called from. Like if I would now see in Rotterdam, light this up. So if I now will start to see same things that start happening for example, in China, I might say, okay, I don't have any clients in China, that we don't do business with China. So I can actually just see, okay, maybe we are on attack or something like that. Or I could see, okay, which APIs are they calling? Like I could just now go over here and see actually who's calling those APIs, how many successful, how many failed. I can see which operations people they are calling. Like I see all the different operations I have over here. I can see which products are calling me. So I might actually see that like Fabricon has a lot of products coming on. I can start talking to them like, are you actually using this correctly? Because we see that you use a lot more calls than others do. Can we help you implement this? Maybe you need some caching on your site, things like that. You can see which subscriptions, which users. So as you can see, there's just a lot of information about who's actually calling me and seeing, okay, what's actually going on in my environment. I can also use application insights. Let me just go. Oh, actually, I have to go from the other way around. So I actually need to go over here. This one over here. Because what I can actually do here is have my application map. I don't know if it's going to show yet. It's going to show. And what you can actually see is in my application map, I can actually also see my calls coming in API management and seeing them go to the different backends. And this is especially nice if you have some calls that are not going well. Like I can immediately see which calls are just succeeding, which calls are failing, which backends might be having issues. So I might have 100 backends and one of them might be failing. I can just go into here and immediately see like a red circle saying, hey, there's a lot of calls failing in here. You might want to look into this. I can then look into the requests. So I can say, okay, please give me the investigation. And then from there, I can actually see, okay, what calls are being made? What are the bodies that are coming through? What are the headers? Things like that. So with that, we're almost done. So I do want to do a quick recap. So first of all, API management is perfect if you want to abstract your backend services, which I think you should always do. So your consumers should never have to know about your backend. They should just have one entry point where they can come, have a single type of authentication, have a single type of calling these APIs, a single endpoint, everything like that. You can transform your messages and protocols, so you can actually do like message transformation. Be careful though, don't overdo message transformation in API management. You can go all out with liquid templates and stuff like that. But API management is probably not the best place for this, because you have limited logging on the around that. Especially for more advanced transformations, I would say use something like a function or logic app. What it is perfect for though is protocol translation, like having a SOAP backend and transforming it to REST frontend, or transforming JSON to XML, things like that. That's just very easy to do. You can use policies to add restriction or capabilities to your services. So add things like rate limiting that we just saw, add things like caching that we had just seen, all those different capabilities that you can just add. Like I said, there's 30, 40 of them out there that you can just easily add on top of your own APIs. And it's just like a few lines of code, as I just showed you, doing like something like throttling is one line of code. I just say how many calls per minute, and it's done. So it's very easy to do this. You don't have to touch your backend, and this is awesome if you have like servers that you cannot really touch anymore, or when it would just take too long for someone else to implement this on your actual backends. And finally, API management gives you a lot of insights, a lot of analytics out of the box. But just going through those different blades, like actually just showing you, like have the monitor analytics on there, or doing application insights where you have that whole nice map over going on there. So with that, I would like to say thank you. If there's any questions, I will check the chat if there's any questions now. If not now, and you might have a question later on, you can always contact me. I'm always available for questions, or if you want to discuss a project or anything like that, I'm always open for that as well.
Okay, so far there's no questions that I can see.
Look.
So if you have any questions, feel free to post them now. So in the chat there's a couple of things, but I don't really see a question in there. So maybe if Jan is still here, I'm not sure if that's really a question or more a comment, which probably is also why it's in the chat and not in the Q&A. So maybe everything was so clear, Eldert, that you didn't. Yeah.
That might be it. And like I said, if there's a question later on, I'm always available there as well.
I don't see any questions coming in anymore. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, seems that that it was all clear. So a very good session. Thank you very much, Eldert. So
thank you. I hope everyone
you're welcome.
And once again, thanks for having me.
Doing the session. So with that, I think we are going to close down here. So and also this was, as mentioned, the last session of this year. So again, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in speaking yourself at one of our future sessions, feel free to send us an email. That is board@techorama.be. And so we'll send out our planning for the next couple of months and next sessions in the coming weeks. So keep an eye on your mailbox for that after the Christmas vacation. So with that, I want to wish you a healthy and a good end of the year. And we'll see each other again, hopefully very soon next year. Thank you for joining, and see you all next year.